That's why I have to open. Now I have to post it, and I'm 2 weeks away.
Oh, now I get it.
Good morning, good morning.
Yeah.
Happy August.
Happy August.
We, our general counsel, Jim Karras, actually looked in the charter this week to see if he could cancel Borough Board for August because we just couldn't believe that we had to meet. But alas,
Good try.
we're here. So I just want to thank everyone for coming out today. I'm excited for our presentation from Ahmed. But first, before we start, we are going to adopt the August 17th Borough Board agenda. So moved.
Second.
Wonderful. Passed. We also are going to adopt the July 20th Borough Board minutes. That was sent around a couple of days ago. Did you have any changes?
No.
Okay. Anyone else, any changes? Everyone good?
Move to adopt.
Wonderful.
Second.
Wonderful. Passed.
What a team.
You guys moving quick. All right, so our presentation today, we have Ahmed Tagani, who is our Assistant Director of Land Use.
That's what I'm told.
And we thought it would be a good idea just to have an internal discussion about some of the initiatives coming out of land use. There particularly have been some very big decisions that have come out of our office, most recently East Harlem, the East Harlem ULURP, and so we wanted to sort of have, go through the last 3 big projects that have come out of this office related to land use, and also just some best practices and resources that to share back with your land use committees. And our hope is that, because we do have a bunch of ULURPs coming down the pipeline, that folks just know that if they have any questions or need any guidance with that we are here to provide that technical assistance.
So we bring in once. This is going to be a long session. We have a lot of questions.
What we will do is that after this presentation, we will send this to all of you. So if you can share with your land use chairs, and again, even if it's us scheduling a meeting with all of the land use chairs at some point to sort of go over some of these more drilled down questions, we're more than happy to do that. I'm volunteering your time already.
It's important to note, Rick has told me that my time this fall is dedicated to CV6. So, sorry Diane, I'm ready. But we'll be, we have a 6-person unit. I'm going to talk about this a little bit about what we can do and how we can be helpful. And the presentation itself, I'm actually going to try to keep it sort of brief so we can get to a more robust Q&A. But thank you and good morning. The presentation in front of you that's awkwardly stapled because I can't figure out how to make the Canon work is a place where you can take notes, but for the most part I'll be staring at the screen. So some of this initial information is stuff you already know about our land use division. Not news to anyone, but we have a 6-person unit. The way our land use planning and development division is organized, Jim Karras is our land use director, also general counsel of the office. Basha Gerhards is the deputy director. I'm the assistant director, and then we have 3 other planners. That's Orlando Rodriguez, who covers boards 9, 10, and 12. We have Erica Baptiste, who covers 2, 3, and 8. And then we have Jefferson Mao, who covers 4, 5, and 7. Dawn Billings is a land use liaison with our division and helps us with administrative work. Hector Rivera runs the topographical office, and Tony Gulata is our borough engineer. So that makes up our superhero land use team. The basic purpose of the land use department in our function as part of the Borough President's Office is that we review actions that are ULURP and non-ULURP, and we'll talk about that slightly for those who have questions, because it's mandated by us in the charter. We highlighted some things in red that we want to point out are specific to our relationship with community boards. So we review and make recommendations, and we do that, as you know, in close consultation with you, the chairs, and the land use committees. We provide technical assistance when asked, and and not only to community boards, but to community groups. And then overall, we provide training and technical assistance. You are all very familiar with our community board leadership training classes. We also do ad hoc intro to land use, advanced land use, intro to landmarks as a couple of examples. So just as I explained, we have a couple of presentations we do here. I want to say that we've been successful in doing them in multiple languages throughout the borough. We'd love to do more. So if there's a big ULURP coming up or a community process that you're thinking about engaging on, it would be helpful to have a couple of refresher courses. We can plan with you to do that and come and provide them at a place that you would like, or we can find that place for you. So when you go to our website and you go to the land use section, you'll see very much at the beginning, early on, the Borough President's 4 principles about planning. The idea, and I got to see this as an activist when I was coming up to work on the West Side that Gale did, has been transferred to the way we approach planning here in the Borough President's office, which is before anything happens, open communication, early planning, and making sure that the communities that are at the table are diverse. Here's a list of some of our our current pre-planning efforts. This is not exhaustive of everything. There are other things on this that we may have played a smaller technical role. For instance, in CB12 with Inwood, we came in at a later point and we made sure and we called for a working group that was convened. But these 5 that we've put up here represent some of our major endeavors over the last couple of years. So I'm going to talk briefly about each of these projects because we've seen a lot of this in the news, and then we can also make sure we have time to talk about it in Q&A. So the thing to remember about East Midtown, it was meant to sort of identify how to preserve and grow an important central business district for New York City. And the other piece that came out of sort of the first round of engagement and decision-making about what would happen in East Midtown under the Bloomberg administration, but wanted to be fixed in this next round, was that there was an as-of-right model that was being called for, but we had to make sure that any triggers that came with that model would make sure the benefits would go to the surrounding community and would improve critical systems, not only for East Midtown, but for the whole city. So this is one of our earliest efforts, started in May 2014. The steering committee was chaired by the borough president and council member Gorodnik, and basically they looked at a 92 block area. The recommendations ended up looking at a 73 block subset, but it's important to note that the committee was, again, diverse. It represented all the interests that were in the neighborhood. So the local community boards were on the committee, you had the business, bid, real estate concerns, and you had civic and local citywide and civic organizations, and you had the participation of landmark advocacy groups, since that was a big piece of what we were trying to do, which was preserve the important buildings that told the city's history. Things to note, it was about approximately 1-year process, and well, you'll hear this a lot. When you want to engage in these community planning processes, you have to really plan ahead for how much time this may take. The zoning was recently approved by the city council. A number of major benefits were tied to it, including $500 million in private funding for upgrades to new buildings, $100 million for street level public space improvements. There were really important conversations between the board and the council member in our office on preservation, the balance between new build and preservation of residential along 3rd Avenue, and those conversations only move forward to a more equitable place because of the advocacy of those partners. And I think probably one of the most important pieces of this particular part, the landmarking for the important buildings happened and was made a condition by the partners. It would happen before certification. So we knew from the onset that we were going to have those protected buildings in an area where we were trying to encourage new development. And I think I believe this is the correct number, 10% of our tax revenue comes from this area. In order to make sure that stays constant, we ended up creating, making sure that 28,000 permanent jobs and 23,000 new construction jobs would be in an area designed to sort of hold that kind of capacity. $50 million for public realms is going to be the kickoff to a governing group that was established through a recommendation from the steering committee and then finally made into the final text. That was another piece of advocacy that came out of that work. The last thing I want to mention...
You said that became part of the actual text amendment?
Yes, so there was a number, and we have the full report, which is on our website, and I'm happy to include the link in what we send out. But a number of the critical pieces from the steering committee actually designed and made into the final text. You'll see, and the same thing happens with some of the other processes that we talk about. By having this defining document in advance, we're in a stronger position to negotiate what the terms will be of the city's, let's call it the city's response to the neighborhood plan. Their proposal that usually goes to certification, I refer to as the city's response. Mm-hmm. And so by having that laid out in the beginning, we were in a better negotiation position. The other thing I want to mention was POPs. So this became a major part of the back and forth. Midtown, while we want to encourage new activity, new building, it's not an area known for having a lot of open space. And if we're going to bring in all these workers, we want to make sure they have places to go eat lunch, or we want to make sure that visitors have a place to go relax, and that there are places of reprieve in the area. So a lot of work went into trying to go back and forth on mandating POPs. The community boards were at the forefront of this, the borough president, the council member, and finally there were some changes put in, which I thought was another major win. So I'm going to move on to the next project, which is East Midtown. So East Midtown, just East Harlem, thank you. Just can't leave East Midtown. I'm really stuck on East Midtown. So East Harlem, the process itself was about 1.5, it was 1.5 years. But I'll say this, and this is the same thing with East Midtown. There's a process, and then there is the advocacy and the implementation of your plan afterwards. And since we're just doing this over the last couple of years, the implementation part, really, I don't have an end date for, and even with East Midtown, we still have, now we've gotten the wins, now we have to make sure the wins happen. And what that structure is that's in place to execute that wins may be different for each neighborhood. For East Harlem currently, we have the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan Steering Committee, which is a 21-member body that's led by 4 project partners. The speaker, Councilmember Viverito, our office, Community Board 11, and local community advocacy group, Community Voices Heard. The 4 project partners, the full 21 steering committee members, steering committee, put together this 130-page document, 260 recommendations that came about after about 40-plus meetings, 8 community sessions, countless surveying, and one-on-one engagement. It was a pretty exhaustive effort. The one thing I want to mention about this is that we actually had 2 different facilitation groups work with us to execute this. The complexity of the research, and then turning that into a communication, a clean communication plan for the public, and also how to feed that information back so that we can figure out how to take those findings and apply it and drill them down into ideas moving forward, required a lot of help beyond what the project partners themselves could do. East Midtown also required a facilitation team. That's something to keep in your mind as you think about whether or not you need this in your neighborhood. A facilitation team will become really important to making things run smoothly, on schedule, and moving forward. The model that we employed in East Harlem has thankfully been recognized by a number of planning bodies as gold standard, and we're very proud of that. The planning, the neighborhood plan, as many neighborhood plans do, they try to go just beyond the zoning framework because zoning doesn't solve everything. right? There are a lot of things that we care about, public policy issues, investments that are outside the realm of zoning. So we took care to make sure that those were addressed. And the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan isn't a plan for one zoning action to happen now, but it's really like a 50-year look ahead into the future kind of document that we're already using to evaluate every ULURP that comes by. So the DCP proposal, the city's proposal, was different from the plan that we worked on for a year and a half, 2 years. And we spent months, much longer than just a couple months, since the end of last year, talking to the city about what the differences were, where the bottom line was. And we just could not get to a place where the application before us looked like something that represented what the community fought for such a long time. And we can only decide on an application based on the material that's in front of us and what the application says. So given all those circumstances, it was clear that this was not that was not a proposal or a response that we could support, and so the borough president issued a no with no conditions. The report takes care to describe what needed to have been in place to support it, what we think is happening in East Harlem, the changes happening, but in order for us to move forward with any kind of growth, certain protections need to be in place. And so that's why the no is issued. There is going to be the next step is the CPC. The public hearing is going to be on the 23rd. We'll be testifying. The East Harlem Neighborhood Plan will be testifying. All partners will be testifying. Garment Center. This is currently ongoing. So is East Harlem for the most part. But our role in this, the part where we are engaged in the steering committee portion is actually now coming to the end. We'll be issuing out a report that came out of the work of a steering committee chaired by the borough president and convened together with Councilmember Johnson and stakeholders, very similar to how East Midtown operated. We pulled together all those important parties that make the garment center what it is. The manufacturers, the business entities, obviously EDC in the city was involved. Ultimately, when we heard first that there was going to be a change to the garment center, we wanted to make sure that the community and the stakeholders were involved in what the outlines of this plan would be. We found out that there could be room for more engagement, more involvement, so very early on called for this to be present. The borough president held a public hearing with many of these stakeholders that was really well attended, and at that hearing, through the main conversations that we had, which were panel discussions and the roundtables that happened after, we heard that there was a lot of concern about the parameters of that current plan. We heard that there were a lot of ideas about how to address some of the issues that the city had publicly stated were things they were seeking to cure as part of their proposal. So we, among others, advocated strongly for a working group to work through this before the city moved forward with their next step. I think you'll find in the report that we are releasing at the end of this week that we listed out some strong recommendations about how to move forward with that area in a way where it promotes its growth, helps the businesses and that industry that's tied very much into that location based on its partnerships and the principles of cluster economics. It will, for us, define how we move forward in our conversations about whether whatever proposal the city moves forward with is appropriate or not. And that process, the city's process for evaluating the land use text will begin on Monday the 21st when it's referred out at CPC. So there's more that will be coming on that this Friday, but we can talk. If there's specific questions, I could try to address it in the Q&A.
So I think in Gale's report, she'll probably talk a little bit more about what's happening like today and tomorrow, because we're right in the thick of it, and it's when we really would love everyone's support. So
it's living hell.
You see how the message gets to straight to it when you can see it. So again, these are things that you're aware of. I'd like to go over it just quickly. When do we weigh in? When do we get involved? Well, we get involved in usually when there's special permits or a zoning map change or zoning text. Certifications and authorizations, that usually is a very case-by-case basis, or when you tell us to get involved. It's when we will evaluate, we'll look, we'll see if we can research and identify a problem, but more often than not, those are because there isn't a formal role for our office in that process. We don't engage unless there is an issue that's arise. But very often, you as the front line in the community will hear from people or identify yourselves. This is an issue. We need your help. Get on it. That's when we may engage in the top two. And there's some notes here that you've received and other PowerPoints that you've gotten about the rules related to certifications, authorizations, and zoning text changes. Those things that I identified in the previous slide, we drilled down a little bit more just to explain. So changes to the city map. One thing that you may or may not know is that the topographical unit here is actually the maintainer of the borough's map. So borough maps. So any changes to the maps actually go through our office, even if it's not a ULIRP change. If it's anything as simple as an address request will go through the borough map office. And we actually use that as a way to get early signs if there are changes or a developer moving into a community. It's important early information and clues to new development, and once we have that, we try to pass that on to other people in the community and community boards. Housing, urban renewal plans and projects. Anyone who deals often with affordable housing projects know that these are vehicles and tools used to bring funding or support or special status to allow affordable housing projects to move forward. There are many areas of Manhattan that have been mapped as urban renewal plans that are currently still in existence, and modifications to those plans require action. We look at that closely since it's really a public policy document as well as a zoning piece. And then there is the acquisition of city-owned land for various projects.
I'm sorry, I have to ask, what are the abbreviations behind these photos?
They're actually, that's a great question. So when you look at a seeker number or a land use application, it's a land use application number. Okay. You'll see that there's like a ZMM or a PQM or, that's what you'll see at the end of the application. So okay. You can use this as a key for this. I just asked Basha, so that's why. You should just call him. Don't tell her. So,
Bless you.
okay. So this is where I'm slowly creeping into our Q&A, but here are some of the things that we've often found as best practices that happen at community boards when it comes to the early part of the process. And usually the first piece of a zoning application is the draft scope of work. Now, for a long time, the draft scope of work public hearing was not something that was focused on and not used as an advocacy piece to start discussing the position of a board or a community on a particular project. We have urged and encouraged people to think differently about this public hearing, and that this is a really important advocacy piece for people to come out and be part of. The draft scope of work usually has all the parameters of the project you need to know to decide whether this on merit is a good or bad idea. And it can be an unwieldy document. Like for Community Board 12, the draft scope of work for the Inwood rezoning right now is 174 pages. It scares me that I know I have to work on it today, but it could be unwieldy. So we tried to drill down to a couple of pieces that are...
So who's the author of that? Is that the applicant or
It's the applicant,
okay.
Yes. It will be the lead agency, and when it comes to the draft EIS, the lead agency is still the author, even if they've hired a consultant. And then you should also know that parts, if it's a city agency, if it's a city application, then various city agencies are responsible for different parts. So DOT handles traffic, LPC handles historic resources. So these are some findings that we would tell you you can drill drilled down in from the onset as a way to like cut through a lot of the noise and focus on things that the draft scope of work you want to make sure is thoroughly studied for any future draft environmental impact statement. The other thing we wanted to urge is we think that the best thing to do for ULIP recommendations, make sure you take the full time. And even if something looks like a slam dunk or something seems like a great project, you're not sure what you'll learn given more public exposure to a project. So the longer you take to make that available, you can make clear to and communicate to the public. Listen, we are inclined to support this application. We have until X date to put in our recommendation. If there are any issues or thoughts on it, please let us know. By submitting it early, we shrink our time and make it less likely that we will have that extra resource to check it out. So please take your full time. And then once you submitted your application, most people are good about this, but you want to make sure that you're sharing this. So send it to us, send it to other community members, but you guys spend a lot of time negotiating, thinking about these recommendations. Please, we want to make sure that they're included. We always include details about your community board recommendations in our own applications. Very quickly, so the board's standards and appeals, there isn't a formal role for the borough president in this process. It's not typically an application that we get involved in often, unless, as I mentioned earlier, that there's something that we have learned from the community that's an issue, or you flag it for us. I think we've had some conversations, or it was mentioned at a previous either borough board or borough service cabinet, that we would like to work together to figure out how a better system for cataloging, flagging, evaluating BSA applications. Recently, there were a number of helpful pieces of legislation passed in the city council around this issue, and so we're still evaluating that, and then very soon, probably in the beginning of the fall or middle of fall, we'll start working on that earnestly with you. But for today's purpose, we just wanted to talk about what the parts of the BSA are that most closely relates to issues that community boards have talked about in the past in their testimony. So the uniqueness, why does the project seek the variance that they're seeking? What makes it unique, and how is it not something that they created, a condition that they created that now they are seeking this relief for? And then also, does this project fit into the neighborhood character? Those are two pieces that the BSA commissioners are looking to community boards, community groups for feedback on as part of their own deliberations. The other parts, obviously, you are welcome to opine on, and BSA applications will have and are required to have thorough finance evaluations and cost-benefit analyses, etc. So you can review that. But your time is really precious. You tackle. Today's community board tackles so many different items. We thought this would be a great way to help hone in where you can focus on when you're responding to these applications. LPC, again, not a formal process, but the borough president is an avid preservationist, and we have worked diligently on this issue. I had mentioned with East Midtown, that was one of our bottom lines moving forward. For East Harlem, we, through the Arts and Culture Committee and then a subcommittee of the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan, the community board's own advocacy that led to recent designations, and a 25 site list that was pulled together by a new group called Landmark East Harlem, that basically laid out a roadmap to talking to the community about landmarks. Our community plans focus on this as a major issue. Our office focuses on this as a major issue. We, again, talk through the different steps of the landmarking process. So the evaluation is done by the research unit inside LPC. then if it moves forward, it's calendared. The next most important piece for you is the LPC public hearing. You'll use a designation report, but often this becomes an organizing piece. Whatever you've heard in your committee meetings, whatever you've put together in previous discussions, this is where you want to bring it to bear at the public hearing. And then after that fact, it may be tabled, it may come back for future hearings, but there won't be public hearings. So that one opportunity is a main and big piece to prepare for. Afterwards, there would be CPC review, there's a city council vote, and there'll be other times for public discussion, but that item number 4 is an important thing to remember.
This is another item where maybe other boards have the issue about our calendar and how we have to respond to LPC, right?
Okay.
Where, they've asked us to do a resolution or give us a time frame, but it may not meet our full board resolution approval.
Yeah.
I don't know if your team has wrestled with that yet.
Yeah, no, it happens with every piece of the land use process. Draft scope of work, responses to draft EIS, anything that happens between July and September, right? And I'm looking at Diane because there are very few boards that have had as busy summer as you have. So that is a real issue. I think we need to talk about that more. At this point, we've been dealing with it. From my knowledge, we've been dealing with it on a case-by-case basis, and we've won some battles and we've lost some battles with timing and scheduling. It sort of depends. This is not for LPC, but on the ULURP clock, dictates how things move, and there's a really good reason for that. There is predictability, fairness. We respect that. With other actions that maybe are not tied as much to a clock, though LPC recently has become more restricted, we would hope there's more flexibility. So I think we should continue that discussion. I don't have an answer now. Only that we've handled it on a case-by-case basis.
But I have to say, ULURP, you've got, at least 60 days. So you've got at least one meeting and a full board minimum. And usually you can work with the developer to get it, and you can work with the agencies to get it certified such that you have 2 opportunities to really examine it. With LPC, you get it dumped on you with no notice. We actually have now many months, we have 2 LPC meetings because stuff comes in so late and the window is so short. So that is something that I think we could all use some help in getting LPC to put more time between. You have the same problem, right?
Yeah. And that was put us in a position where you're almost forced to turn down the application.
Yeah,
because
that's okay.
there's not any time to even deal with it. We may be able to work with them, but we're forced within a small window to either say yes or no.
Their window.
We've heard that before, and I've seen that in action. And it's not the way it should happen. I don't think the applicant or LPC or the board wants it that way. So that's certainly something we can.
Our problem is sometimes LPC has voted on something before our full board meeting, and so we have to vote because we're required to. But everyone is like, well, they already agreed to it.
So what's the
It's a shorter clock than BSA, it's a shorter clock than all the other agencies, really.
Yeah, I will say this, and going back to that slide, there are other bodies that are responsible for this. So even if it's after the fact, I'm not saying that that's the way it should happen. I think we should talk about how to adjust it. That still becomes an important factor with the local council member, or that becomes an important factor maybe in CPC review, but still there are these other points of contact. So it's still good that you've done the resolution, but that doesn't address what Anthony's brought up and Terry's talked about, which is that timing.
And LPC, in order to move their backlog, not that I'm advocating for your help, please, please. They're shifting a lot to staff level. Stuff that we used to get to opine on. I don't know if anybody else is seeing it, but I just wrote a letter yesterday, 2 days ago. 2 applications went through that would normally have come to us, but they went through on staff level, and we understand that they're getting rid of the backlog, the good thing, but to do it with minimal review and to cut us out of the process, not a good thing. So help on that would be.
That's certainly something to be helpful. Sure. So just to continue, these are some examples of how we've been involved in our LPC work. Obviously, the backlog work that we've done is very much known to members of the Borough Board, and we're happy to resend any information that you think your members would need to know what the backstory is, the history of this. But we've gotten at least 10 Manhattan designations. We're working on more. Morningside Heights Historic District. This is particularly important to us, if for no other reason than we think that there needs to be a greater effort to preserving our historic resources in Upper Manhattan. And we are making sure that we dedicate extra staff time to looking at these projects and looking at these pieces. Lower Manhattan, we still love you. Middle Manhattan, we're still your friend. But we do think that some more attention and time needs to go preserving these areas because that's where new development is happening right now. And if we're not putting extra time and attention there, as the LPC commissioner, the chair has talked about being a major priority, these areas where new developments happen, rezonings are happening, then I don't think we're doing right by how we allocate resources. So Upper Manhattan's a major focus, Morningside Heights, major win for us there. The 12 new East Midtown landmarks, again, we made landmarks an important piece of how we determine our steering committee recommendations. We've done that for East Midtown. We made it clear that was one of the issues we had with East Harlem when we issued out the no. Underground Railroad sites, that, it's that and Stonewall, which is not listed here, but there are particularly important changes that we'd like to see at the LPC, which means, when referring to, is culturally significant sites. There are limitations to what the landmark law will allow them to do, and we respect that. But we do think that a push toward more culturally significant recognition in conjunction with architectural significance will be important, especially for our Upper Manhattan sites that we want to see considered. So we're excited about that. And then the Morris Park Historic District extension. So that blank sheet means I'm done. Thank you. Basha Gerhardt is the author of this, so let me see her. Is there, I wanted to use this time now, I'm sure there are other things on the agenda, but I want to use this time to answer any questions you may have about the projects that we've taken on. We didn't have a slide up about the Lower Manhattan Resiliency, the Coastal Resiliency Project, because it's a very different kind of project from these community planning pieces, but it is an example of how our office can work with community board to put together a working group around an issue. So when it came to the Lower Manhattan project, we were asked early on to develop a process to work with the community board in convening an entity that would, a task force that would look at this from all different sides, and then work with the city as they move through their process. And we focused extensively on the process guide so that it was, when you look at each of these planning processes, it maybe seems like the least important part, but deciding how voting happens, how membership is acquired, what individual roles and responsibilities are, if you clean that up and make it strong from the beginning, the rest of your time will be that much better. So that's like one note that I remember distinctly was important to us for the Lower Manhattan Resiliency Project, because we're currently going under changes of membership, and when that happens, now we just refer to the process guide. Anyway, for that particular piece, there's a lot of the planning and the research development that's actually going on the city side and less on our side, so it's not the same as many of these planning processes, but it's still an example of how we work to develop a communication apparatus, so we make sure that the plan is relating well to the outside public, that we're all coordinating, and that information that the city has at several critical points is getting to the community instead of waiting for whenever they're ready for an update. So it's been a good thing for us to have partnered with you on, and I think we still have a lot of work to do, but it's important. Anyway, at this point, is there any questions about community planning or how we can be working together on projects that you may have, or I don't know, anything that comes to mind? I'm an open book today. I'm not sure, I don't know how the question goes. I think we go from the board member first.
Well, we have, we're gonna have a project certified, I think in October, the 108th Street garages. And we've been meeting for the last, I guess, 6 or 8 months with Councilmember Levine and his staff and with various of the stakeholders to talk about the whole process and to educate the different groups. And so for the scoping document, we did more of an outline of all the items that were, that we felt were missing from the document. So we can use that as our base when we get the environmental review. So we, you know, it'll be easy to put the 2 documents together and see what we asked for, if we got it or didn't get it.
I mean, that's an excellent example. I mean, not only does an outline that's laid out very clearly is helpful to you in organizing your thoughts moving forward, it's probably the most ideal way of presenting the board's position to the public, ultimately. The denser the document, and I'm a guy who unfortunately writes way more dense than I should, ends up becoming very hard to bring people into the conversation about the project. So that sounds like it's the appropriate way.
We have 3 groups that are concerned. One is the parents at the school across the street, who had been told things that weren't true, so meeting with them turned out to be good. Then there are the people that park in the 3 garages that are upset that they're losing parking spaces. And then there's a group of residents that are against the upzoning. And so they all have varying.
Well, then there are also the people who support it.
And there's a large group that support it, yeah. So you have basically 4 groups.
And so currently, is it the community board taking on the responsibility of being the facilitator and convener of all these discussions? Is it you and the council member?
We've all done it.
And, and in how this process has moved forward, would you do it differently? You know, I'm just talking about how we work through a community planning process. And this is you in the you're in a reactive state at this point.
My concern now is how we communicate effectively with each of the groups moving forward, because we will be going through.
I mean, that's a controversial issue. So one suggestion I think we all need to do more of is using the as much online, which we've started to do, and in the meetings, making it as visual as possible. And I wish we had more staff to help you do that. But that's something that we're going to work on, because that helps, you know, to see the advantages and disadvantages of whatever you're trying to present. That probably would have helped Diane a lot in that some of those meetings, right? Up on the board, those are the facts. Stop telling me that that's not what you said, because that's what you said. That kind of stuff. So that's something to work on. And 108 would be an example, because there's information, misinformation. This is a fact.
Sort of like charts,
We're experiencing and have continued to experience the difficulty of getting agency resources, particularly DCP, involved in neighborhood rezonings, particularly when they do not feel that there is enough room for upzoning that will result in significant new development to happen under MIH. So it's been the position of Board 9 for 30 years that Morningside Heights needs to be rezoned. We passed another resolution on it for the new commissioner of DCP, but we have spent a lot of time working with local groups interested in seeing that rezoning happen. And the message from DCP, someone said, it's like the Wizard of Oz, where they say, bring me the broom of the witch. You come back with the broom, and they're like, come back tomorrow and bring me something else. And so there's this experience we're having. At one point they asked, well, what designation do you think should be there? And we're thinking, for years we've been told not to tell you what designation we think should be there, because we were told to leave that to the planners. And so do you have advice for boards attempting to get DCP to pay attention at a time when they are coming off of Midtown East, when they are still grappling with Inwood and East Harlem and the other various things that they're doing?
So I think what you're running up against, and having been involved with you in these discussions, the administration has a set of policies. They execute those policies through their agencies. Right now, the mayor is focused on creating affordable housing and housing in general to meet population growth in the city. has taken precedent for where they're scrambling with those resources. So if you look at all the projects they have moved forward, they involve major increases in density for housing. You know, there are certainly limitations to what an agency can and cannot do, and they're moving forward based on how they're executing and meeting those priority goals. And the mayor says that he is going to reach 200,000 units, then they have to meet some timeline to do it, and so that's where they're probably going to go first. Other than what you're doing now, which I think is the right path, you're bringing groups together, increasing the volume on making this a priority for DCP, growing the list of people who support what you're trying to do, and you know, if I can say this, because, or you can talk more to it, you know, your group has moved forward with thinking and pointing out areas that you can designate to have that growth. It's really just going to be a matter of public pressure. We have been involved with a community group on the east side, the East Rivers 50s Alliance, and their application to make changes to the Sutton Place area. And I think we've done very similar things to you. We've put together a comprehensive plan that increases growth but respects neighborhood character, and it's been a back and forth battle with DCP. I think a lot of community boards have laid out public policy positions that have existed for decades, haven't moved for decades, and you're always going to be up against what the administration's policy positions are, and both of you are trying to execute it, and you know they have control of the agency. The main tool that we have is public pressure and leveraging those other things that they want to do in the community to try to force the hand on these positions. So we'll just continue doing what we're doing now. That being said, I think, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, you are answering what DCP is asking you to do. You are putting forward those proposals. It just might take them a little while because the projects you talked about right now, Inwood, East Harlem, still going on. They have individual applications that, if you look at the pre-application statements, list pretty lengthy. It's a pretty long list. They are very busy, so we just have to continue to remind them this area is important.
I had two items that I was going to use in my report, so they're perfect here. So maybe I'll save some time. They're kind of related. Your best practices and how you develop a process, a great idea, and want to implement that. But often we deal with one-offs, okay, where we don't have that full time or process. And I thought about it in the context of East Midtown, and that's the whole idea of impact funds, right? We've had the issue of these used as of right developments, and they put an immense impact on the community, the character of the neighborhood, school seats, sanitation, traffic, etc. And we don't have a way of or process of handling that impact. I think you may have accounted for some of that in the actual text amendment, yeah, but we don't always have that opportunity. And for example, it's also become a problem in Lower Manhattan. We had a text amendment, which was very controversial, about POPs along Water Street. And now there were some unintended consequences, where the first application is adhering to the text, but because of the way they're doing things, they'll actually get additional market rate apartments on the second floor of this build out. And they have to do nothing for the community. And so maybe we can figure out, how do we handle that? You know, what are best practices around impact fees, or community negotiations? What was your experience?
I mean, when a text amendment happens, or if something builds to the existing zoning, the way of dealing with the impact, according to how things happen now, is a city agency responds through their capital budget, right? So they will go, if there is increased pedestrian traffic or commuter traffic with vehicles, then the response, because of as of right development, because of their building to the framework, then DOT comes out, does a transportation study, changes vehicular pedestrians, or they come out and they do a bulb out on a sidewalk. They deal with it through their capital budget, and they don't deal with it at the time of that as of right development, because when they've made the rezoning, they've accounted or they've said they'll allow for this much.
It made some
adverse.
sense.
Like you have to go back to the zoning resolution. There isn't, there hasn't been a lot of discussion about doing that, having impact fees on as of right development, because we're a city that is primarily as of right development with exceptions that the public has to opine on, not the reverse. The best way that we've been able to advocate for those changes is through the capital budget. And getting, with Lower Manhattan, getting DOT to try to pursue this traffic study that we say is really important because of all the new residential conversion, well not new, but the current residential conversions and the resurgence of business downtown. These are things that need to be looked at, but they're going to deal with that through the capital budget. They're not going to deal with that through a zoning mechanism. Unless but if there's an individual application that comes through that wants to change, that would be different. So I guess my answer is capital budget. But if there's a movement to try to do something different and push the definition of impact by as of right development, I think we'd be interested in having that conversation.
I think I hear from other chairs that we're wrestling with this, that we have little control over it. That's understandable. But the impact is much more significant than the original planning accounted for.
Well, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, one thing that we can start with, and maybe we could talk about this as a group, is we can go back and we can see what neighborhood. It will be easier when you look at a neighborhood rezoning area because the environmental impact statement covers the kind of geographic context that we need to look at, but we can see what they estimated growth would be because they do a 10-year forward look and see if what's on the ground matches to what the study says. And if there is a difference, then again, the way we're probably going to be able to get that is through the most easiest. And I'm defining easy, it's not easy, but it would be through capital funding. But that could be one way for us to see if what the city anticipated as impact on the ground as a result of their neighborhood rezoning matches up to what's going on, or if they need to do more.
Give you one thing that's a bit of a broken record. Seeker is flawed.
Yeah.
And what Seeker allows is to take the impact, as you said, of a one-off or one massive building, or one building that is one unit below the limit, and say, okay, it doesn't trigger all the needs for everything else, when there are 4 developments going up next to each other, each one below the limit, that's going to overwhelm our schools and our infrastructure. Any help, any way that we can gather and really work on making Seeker more reflective of an urban environment rather than the distillation of SECRA that it is, I think would make all of us able to have the ability to look at projects in context, which right now we don't have unless it's, as you said, a neighborhood.
That's absolutely, I mean, we couldn't agree with you more. And so I have like 3 quick things to say about that. One, we have been advocating for SECRA reform for, I guess, even before I've gotten here, since the borough president came to office, and we have, in each of our recommendations, not each, I would say many of our recommendations, we've pointed out either factual errors, things brought up to us by community board members that were just completely incorrect about their evaluation on major topics like generating school seats. In fact, with the East Harlem neighborhood plan, there is a miscalculation. They undercount the number of children that are born in Upper Manhattan, resulting in a wildly inaccurate assessment of how many school seats we'll need in the future for projects in Upper Manhattan. And these, in many cases, these applications, these environmental review statements are these huge documents where if you look close enough, you'll see that there are issues. Also, we take the position that for some of the topics, there needs to be a closer alignment with the socio-economic impact of that topic area. A big example being public health, environmental impacts, not only whether or not a sewage system is durable or not, but will the extra sewage lead to issues that will negatively impact the families there that will then worsen their life moving forward. Now it gets far more intense and more costly, so those are things that we're dealing with. The model that we've used in East Harlem, it's been used in Brownsville, across, starting to be used in this country, but mostly prevalent in Europe, is impact assessments. It's a separate social economic look through these various topics. The one that I would refer you to is the East Harlem Health Impacts Assessment that was done by the New York Academy of Medicine. That's what we're calling for as becoming an integral part to Seeker. The second thing I would say is that we have been working with Councilmember Reynoso's office and the Regional Planning Association, plus with organizations actually across the city, on looking at issues around ULIP reform that includes amendments to the Seeker process. And there'll be a point in time where we're going to want to get your feedback on this as well. And we hope to be able to do that in the fall or in early winter. I will say that doesn't mean that this body couldn't also draft its own letter that outlines these issues. And I would say that we're approaching a good time to do it, because my last point is that the Mayor's Office of Environmental Coordination, which is tasked with being in charge of this, is looking at the Seeker technical manual now. It's about, I think they look at it every 3 or 4 years. They're reaching the point where they're going to be proposing changes, and if there was ever...
Are they going to have a public hearing or something?
You know what, we're going to meet...
So,
we're going to meet with them to understand. Anything that involves those kind of changes will involve some kind of public hearing.
But the community board should come up with some kind of resolution, and if it's appropriate, and that should be included in some kind of public hearing.
Absolutely.
We should ask for a public hearing if there is a one.
So there will be some kind of public conversation, but as the Borough President said, this is a really good opportunity for you to develop a document from this body that lists out these issues. And then individually as boards, you may also have things that you want to talk about, but a statement from the Borough Board would be really powerful. The Land Use Division is working on getting those details about what their rollout is. They seem pretty far away from any public engagement on this, but that doesn't mean we couldn't send a letter now, since we know that they're thinking about it.
Could we work with the Land Use Division to help draft it? Because
Sure.
we all have like nothing but free time to do
Yeah,
that.
right. Yeah, you
We
guys
can do it, I just want to make sure you want to do it. Is
We
that
do
general
want to.
consensus?
Yes.
I think, yeah.
We all
All
want
right,
to.
next, let's keep going.
Yep. So, oh sure. I think one more question. Okay. One last question. And then Marie.
As our full-time employee, we'll get back to you.
Yeah, I know. So I'm owned by Rick this fall. Okay. Okay.
You have them on the back.
I was just wondering what sort of analysis is done as a borough land use division on fair housing, because community districts, it's hard to do by community districts, but all these projects have an impact on fair housing and concentration of different types of land use in different areas. So how do you do that as a land use division? How are you addressing it?
Currently, we rely on other people's studies and research and work. We try to evaluate what has been put out about fair housing rules and the consequences of allowing certain kind of projects or certain kind of policies to create different housing models in neighborhoods, and we either refer to that work or we try to build off it. At this point, we don't have our office doesn't have a Manhattan study that we've done on fair housing impacts of this current mayor's housing plan, but that could be something that we do moving forward. And I know that you and others are involved in fair housing research, so if there are things that we're not looking at, and I'm happy to put together the research that we have looked at that we should be using in our analyses, that would be more than welcome.
So my understanding, the new 421A speaks to community preference, basically no community preference.
The new 421A.
Coming from the state. And
Well,
that's pretty much what she's talking about, the fact that they're trying to meet the federal government's requirement of fair housing. The other thing that I'm hearing is the low-income tax credits for housing coming from the federal government. As part of the tax reform, inclusion in that, in their points, is no community preference. So this is a real issue that could be happening for not just our communities, but across the state, across all of the states. So we should be aware of it. The tax reform obviously is tied, that bill would be tied to the tax reform that comes out of the budget, so.
In Washington.
In Washington.
I'm not sure that's happening. I think they skipped that and went to infrastructure, and I'm not sure they're going to get that.
But it is within the, it's being looked at by Senator Orrin Hatch. There is a bill out that they are currently having public hearings for. I happened to see it on.
It wasn't clear that it's going to go anywhere. But yeah.
Excuse me, Gale.
No, I'm just saying it wasn't clear it was going anywhere yesterday, but you never know.
You never know with them,
And,
Exciting times.
And then there's the court case that's moving through the courts.
Right, but that's why I said they seem to be putting in the necessary points to address that, if the Fair Housing Act or the lawsuit passes.
Well, let me.
I think you should look at it and be aware of it.
That's. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I think that's my time today, folks. Art, thank you. As you guys know, our information's on the website. We love hearing from you. You're our favorite. Thank you.
And we'll also, again, we'll send this around to everybody. So next up, we have the report by the Borough President.
Sure. Well, thank you for being here in August. It's a big sacrifice, much appreciated. So there are a couple of things that we're working on, and then in terms of events, and then more substance. So there's a big deal in terms of Women's Equality Day. It always takes place, I think Bella Absa instituted on August 26th. It's a Saturday. So we are doing a press conference. Everybody's welcome on the steps of City Hall on Friday, August 25th, mostly to talk about voter registration. And there are places that will be announced on the Saturday as to where people can do voter registration. It's nothing, we've always done this every year. It's hard to get press, but we want people to know that Women's Equality Day exists and that we want to make sure that people do voter registration. Just so you know, November 6th of this year, 2017, is the date that New York agreed to have women vote. And then 2020 is the year in which the United States allowed women to vote. You know, that's the anniversary. These are all anniversaries. So November 6th is the anniversary of the New York State allowing women to vote, and 2020 is the anniversary of the United States allowing women to vote. So there's a lot of activity, particularly around the 2020, but I think there'll be some around the November 6th of this year. 2020.
I'm sorry, I don't know what 20.
Sure, in other words, women.
The year 2020.
Yeah,
Oh,
year
I'm sorry.
2020, I'm sorry.
1920.
It's August, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Year 2020 and year of this coming November 6th is the anniversary of women in the state of New York being allowed to vote.
The 100-year anniversary?
Yeah, they're both 100 years, and they're both being celebrated by the archives. The municipal archives is doing a lot of work. So there's a little tiny bit of excitement about August 26th because it's kind of leading up to that. So not a big deal in terms of land use, but FYI. Garment district. Oh my goodness. So when the mayor said we're moving to Brooklyn, Sunset Park, the garment center, I said no. And so we started a task force, and it has been a wonderful group of both designers, real estate, community boards, and folks who are expert in this field, which I am not, but I've now been to a lot of factories. We have representatives of the factories. And the short version is, just like many of you have participated in groups that have a facilitator, we did that with the city agency, city planning, and EDC. It's a really complicated issue because we, most of the group, not everybody, want to have, if there is a reduction in the preservation, which now states you have to have manufacturing, right? 1 and 1. If there's that to go away, so to speak, then we have to have a certain number of square feet We say 500,000, some people say 1 million, some people say 300,000. Has to be a number that you have to hit that in terms of having the IDA or buy a building or something that preserves the manufacturing. And again, this is a short version. So we are trying really hard to work, as we speak, sit here now with the administration to agree to that. They have not agreed. So we may have a press conference tomorrow at noon at City Hall to say you have to have a phase-in. You can't just get rid of what we call the preservation. And then what will the landlords do? They will rent to the highest bidder, which could be office space or it could be a nonprofit, but it won't be manufactured. So there are about somewhere between 900 and 400, depending who's counting, manufacturers in the garment center. And even the big manufacturers have said, we may want some of us to go to Brooklyn. We got to keep the hub in Manhattan. What's been wonderful are the costume designers on Broadway. They are so fabulous. And the manufacturers and the people who do the zippers and the pleaters and so on. They've all been participating. And you have FIT, you have Pratt, obviously, coming from Brooklyn. You have all the people who come from around the world. You have Parsons. They all believe that it should stay here because this is the hub, and then you can have spokes in other boroughs. So that's the short version. It's very challenging. We're working night and day. Jim Karras has slept. Not at all. Just garment center. So we're working on it. But there is a press conference, I think, tomorrow. You could check at noon. Board 4 and 5 are certainly very aware of it. They've been participating. The other issue is in don't know the date, September 8th, African American Day Parade Dinner. We always honor individuals before the parade actually takes place, which will be the following Sunday. This year is healthcare. So if you have people who you think should be honored because of their work in healthcare in Harlem, please let us know. We have some that are already being suggested, but welcome others. The mayor is coming to Manhattan. It is the last borough that he is doing, as some of you know. He's going to be here September 25th to the 29th. He is doing Upper Manhattan, apparently. But if you have other suggestions, let us know. We gave him some list of events, and we will welcome others. This is not an easy week to put together. I don't think it's his favorite borough. So, again, suggestions about where he should visit, street walkings, people, meetings, etc. So you know this is happening. October is always Open House New York. It is one of my favorite events. You get to go places you never get to go. So in this room and this building, I have to thank the Department of Citywide Administrative Services. Last year, we're going to do it again. You could go up to the cupola on the top. Free, F-R-E-E. You cannot imagine how many people signed up because you get to take pictures. You don't have to pay the observation dollars that you have to at many other locations, and it is a better viewing. So you should tell people to sign up under Open House New York. It might actually be something you want to put in your emails because it is a very popular, and we want to have New Yorkers. People come from all over the world for Open House New York. It's a very big economic development tool for the city, but we'd like to have New Yorkers get to see their own city. We are working on reports. Obviously, we have a lot. We just did one on mental health in the schools. And it's very interesting to me in today's blogs on education, one of the comments was that this basically calls for social workers in every school. That's the short version. We have counselors, we need social workers. Very interesting. One of the teachers commented on the report and said this is needed more than ever because of Charlottesville and all the other discussions that young people are now challenged with, not to mention adults. So I think that if you have any opportunity as part of one of your committees to talk about, it could be called mental health, it could be called service, you call whatever you want. In the schools, we would love to see more support for that. It is very hard to get the DOE to agree that this is a necessity for every school. And I don't understand it, having had challenges with kids, I don't understand how that's not a requirement. And it would change the dynamic and the environment of the school. In terms of legislation, we are working up with Councilmember Chin on pop-up legislation. I think anybody knows from Board 2 about, and Terry, you can talk more about that. We're also very focused on the commercial rent tax in Manhattan. We gotta get rid of it. We gotta at least support council member Grodnick's bill, which you're aware of, and then we have one for supermarkets, which basically says we absolutely support council member Grodnick with the CRT, not including, so we say, so many stores and businesses. We'd like to have fewer having to pay the tax. However, with grocery stores, we don't think any of them should pay the tax. It's hard to have a grocery store in New York City, and they're becoming in Manhattan an endangered species. So we want to get rid of them for that particular type of store.
Do you want community boards? My board is considering possibly doing a resolution supporting both
Yes.
Councilmember Borodnik and Councilmember Johnson's
Yes, we would love that.
bills.
Yeah, we would
Do we
love that.
want to do something from Borough Board as well?
Sure, that'd be great. I think it's across the boroughs, more than one borough, more than one board. That'd be terrific. Yep, we should talk about that. Then finally, just things we've been working on this summer. Rikers Island is, as I understand it, proposed to be closed. It's not quite clear how, when, or etc. In the borough of Manhattan, we're going to involve you. We've been working all summer with a list of people to be on a task force. In the borough of Manhattan, it is the Tombs. And if you talk to Judge Lippman, for whom I have great respect, his suggestion, and if you read the report, is to take the Tombs, which is right next to the courthouse, tear it down, this is quite amazing, tear it down and build it anew. And the individuals who were there would be moved to Rikers in a temporary situation for 2 or 3 years, and then they would come back, I assume, or some new people would come back to a new facility. Currently, there are about 1,600 Manhattanites on Rikers Island, and there are approximately 900 cells, if that's the correct term, at the Tombs. So obviously there's a disconnect on those numbers. But if you do more alternatives to incarceration, et cetera, then you end up with fewer. This is a topic of discussion. This is not, oh, I think we'll do this tomorrow. No. So we're working on the list of people to participate. We had wonderful interns working all summer on how to reevaluate and what are the issues that came up in the report and so on and so on. So if you have if you'd like to be on this task force, if you have people from the boards who would like to be on this task force, obviously Board 1 is very interested in this, and the Tombs is in your district, et cetera, et cetera. So we're trying to figure this all out. So I want to let you know we have put a lot of time in on that. I interviewed and met with a lot of the groups that work with people who were formerly incarcerated. We have also young people. We had over 100 interns this summer. As you know, I feel very strongly about interns. I love them. The interns from the high schools went to every part of the waterfront. I can't say that they took on resiliency as you might, but they're going to do a report called Teens Take the Waterfront, and it's what their ideas for the waterfront are. So they visited. They were so excited about this. I cannot tell you. So we'll just, it's sort of like a fun project. Well, you'll get a copy of that. We also this summer had some of you may have attended, basically called Caregiving 101, which basically is how seniors and many of us are dealing with getting older and the care involved. And without getting into all the specifics, 800 people showed up. I mean, it was unbelievable. We had to do overflow rooms at Fordham Law School, et cetera, et cetera. Every year we try to do something for seniors. We did the activities of the brain last year, and it was similarly well attended. So there are so many issues that are something, if you have a senior task force and you want to talk about the non-information that is gathered for seniors, it's a good topic because it was no way clear as to what is available for seniors in our city in terms of getting older. Not a lot of information is circulated. We have been working with NYCHA, as you have over and over again. The challenges are, we just met with them about all of their recycling and composting or not issues that they're dealing with, not to mention the challenges of infill and jobs, so that's an ongoing topic. We also met a lot with the land trust. I know East Harlem has been looking at land trust. I know there are folks looking at Chinatown land trust, trying to figure out if many of the buildings in Chinatown could in fact be part of a land trust agreement with the families that own them or the associations that own them. So it's something about land trust in your boards as a educational, I think Board 11 is already quite familiar, but the others may not be, as a way in which to deal with housing and affordability long term. It's a topic that there are a lot of people who are expert in. So I just want to mention that. And then, what is this? levels of equitable representation. I have no idea what that means. I'm sorry. What is this coming about processing?
Oh, our interns did a community board study on this latest process that we did and the people that we chose. And so what we were really looking to see is who's represented on the community boards. And so we looked at things like age, we looked at things such as ethnic diversity also, and we ask all these questions on the application. So like, where do you live? What kind of housing do you live in? And so we really wanted to see, where are people represented, and it really helps me because in another couple of weeks, I'm going to be calling you all to talk again about who do you need on the board, what are you looking for, and also to maybe, and what I'm going to do is actually fill in with some of the information that they gave us, what we see as systemic gaps. So, folks from NYCHA, we really want to encourage having people in public housing on community boards. And I also know for some of the other boards after this last process, folks looked at reinstituting public membership and seeing how we can use public membership to maybe ease people into full board membership, maybe folks that might not have the time or might not even have some of the skills that are maybe needed, but we can work with them through public membership to hopefully transition them.
The bottom line is we tried to see, and we'll share all this information. What is the demographics of your area, and does the board match it? Yes or no? Mm-hmm. That's the bottom line. But we'll share. Okay, I'm done.
Okay. All right, Community Board 1.
Right. So I brought up the idea of the impact fees and what's happening with all POP, so we'll continue that discussion. And we have our first application for our POPs infill now at 200 Water Street. And it's becoming a challenge because the applicant will meet all the requirements, but in the way it's being done, they'll actually have more benefit than the text amendment allowed for. So that will be a challenge. We are still wrestling with the issue of Pest Slip Park, which today doesn't exist. It was planned for, but Parks has been, has publicly said they want to back out of the project, and we need to follow up with that. We're going to work with Boxer and the office about it. Resiliency is an ongoing issue. Jamie and I will talk about how we can help each other out with both of our resiliency plans and the various agencies that are involved. And frankly, we're trying to figure out how we can restart or re-energize this whole process. We're coming up on the 5th anniversary of Sandy, and it really is amazing that we're still vulnerable, and there may not be an end in sight yet. So that's a critical issue for our board.
Take up voting.
Exactly right. Some of you may know I have a posting now for a new district manager. So if anyone wants to speak to me about that, that'd be great. And we also had some turnover. Our high school student, fortunately, is going off to college. So we now have 3 openings in our board that we're going to work with Lucille on. And that's really it.
All right, Community Board 2.
So we are getting to the end of the first round in an expected onslaught of special permits for oversized retail in our M15s in NoHo and Soho. We do thank the Borough President's Office for supporting our board with a very thoughtful response and my favorite 2-letter word when it comes to developer overreach. No. Let's see where that goes in council. We are still working to get controls on the crowds that are popping up outside these crazy stores, as the Borough President mentioned. There were just 2 New York Times articles 2 weeks ago on how the crowds and the lines are the point, that that's the social, you saw those too, that is the social interaction. And I know it's localized to CB2 right now, but it is coming to an empty storefront near you. This has become so popular and so financially lucrative that it will spread. It just, we just got to enjoy it first.
And it happens to be that you all have the strip of cult stores that everybody wants to go to. So I also recognize that as an issue.
We are happily successful and victims of that exact same success. So yes, thank you. We also appreciate all the collaboration among the community boards and the Borough President's Office on the issues that cross our borders. I did speak with David Dodge, and we're working on getting together an L-Trains task force for the five boards that are affected by it, because that's going to be a bit of a mess. So we're all in discussion, and I am especially excited about today's discussion, which brought up two things where each board can individually and collectively as Borough Board collaborate to maybe make some real change, especially seeker and the loss of small businesses due to the real estate taxes. The idea of us standing together on this, I think, is very, very strong, so thank you all. That's it.
So I actually, we didn't meet in August, as did many people didn't. We therefore don't have a report. I'll save you, sort of all the issues simmering underneath, but we'll be back in September with a lot more interesting things. Unfortunately, I have to go right now. So we'll see you all in a
4 is not here.
5,
6.
Oh, boy. Okay. So if you're looking for a district manager, just don't poach ours, okay? Because
You're hidden in the basement somewhere.
yeah, we are hidden in the basement of the
That's why.
13th precinct, so you won't find him anywhere. Just some quick things. We too have lots of stuff simmering, but not quite ready for prime time. But we're going to have to deal in September with the opening of the UN, which causes traffic craziness in Midtown. And the only reason I mention it, because we have it every year, but we're starting to have real bad traffic problems. The Midtown tunnel construction causes a backup and therefore noise and disruption to the neighborhood. And we've been dealing with all these construction projects that fit what Terry was talking about, where everything is fine in in one particular lot, but when you look at a larger area, it becomes a total disaster. I mean, you've got like 5 or 6 projects all within a 10-block area, and all of them are individually permitted, all perfectly fine individually. They just don't have to meet anything. So one of the things we've been working on, we're working with Ahmed on it, and some outside consultants through the Borough President's Office, is a construction site mapping tool, which will help us identify where things are currently going on. Now, this has taken us 1.5 years so far, and we still have to do a good deal of individual input of data. So we were trying to get away from that, and we needed something like we needed a down and dirty tool. So the district manager has put together a mapping thing where, the district office staff and some members of the board have gone out and taken pictures of streets, and we just did a Google map. Dots on the map, lines on the map. It goes from this place to this place. They can hit on it, and it describes what it is, and a picture will pop up, so somebody can see this is what we're talking about. As we get closer to making that completely work, we just got our first demonstration of it last night at our executive meeting. It is something that I will share, because I think it's something that we're finding it very useful.
Yeah.
The only problem is that with these construction projects, they'll never give you a finish date. We want it as a planning tool, so we can say, well, when somebody comes to us and say, we're going to be doing this, well, how about you delay it by 6 months? Then this project will be complete, the community will be happier, but they never do that, but we're working on it. Just a couple other things. We have a senior survey that's posted on our website. We're trying to get input from our local older adult community, is what I've been told is now the better term. And we've got about 50 replies so far on things like, what kind of activities do you participate in? What would you like to participate in them? How do you do that? How do you get to a location? There's multiple choice and then comments, and we're collecting them, and we'll post the results when we get further along. We're also we're making it available online, but of course seniors are not always the biggest user group for online. So we're also getting hard copies out to the senior centers, to libraries, to the larger buildings that have aging populations. And hope we get a representative sample. And if we don't even get a representative sample, at least we'll get a sample, and we'll have some input from our seniors. And, I did want to just say one more thing. We have a report. We did a landmarks resource guide, which identifies all the landmarks and landmark districts in our neighborhood, in our community board district. It has hyperlinks to the city's various information things. So if somebody wants to research that, all they have to do is click on the link and they can find out about any landmark that's in our district. And similarly, we do have a POPS report that's 2 years old now, where we went out and surveyed every single POPS in our district and has an update. We were actually looking for violations so that we could report them and have them followed up on. But it is now 2 years old and it does need to be updated, but it's something that in our district, POPs are we have among the largest number of POPs in the city in our district. So that's something else we have that we have to be updating, but it's also something, a report that's out there. That's it.
Yes, I'm next. So we had 2 committee meetings in August. One was the parks. It seems as though the Big Apple Circus, which went bankrupt 2 years ago, was purchased at bankruptcy court by a profit-making organization, and they have signed a lease with Lincoln Center and the Parks Department, and there will be a Big Apple Circus in the park this fall.
Good.
We had quite a few people at the meeting that they first went in July to the BCI meeting to get a wine and beer license, which BCI gave them. Then they were supposed to come the following Monday to Parks, and they refused to come because Lincoln Center couldn't come with them. And they have in their contract that they do not have to go to anything without having Lincoln Center with them. So there was a meeting in August where they came, and they did, Gale asked if they would give free tickets to the children at Amsterdam houses. So I made sure that Gale's representative, who was there, and I spoke with them, and they promised that yes, we would get free tickets, and that if there were any other groups, they would get free tickets, and then I've connected them with the correct people. But it seems as though, and we did finally get a copy of the contract, which we had a foil. And
Spirit of cooperation.
we have also offered to have a construction oversight committee hosted by the board, which we do when if there's a big construction going on, we'll have oversight. But we've tried to get Lincoln Center to meet with us, and they're now saying the middle of October, which is after the circus will start putting up the tent and all the equipment begin early in October. So that really isn't helpful. Our preservation committee met only because there was a preservation issue that had to be voted on at this full board in September. And we're just having preliminary meetings now about the 108th Street. The city's going to sell 3 buildings that are parking garages to West Side Federation for supportive senior housing. That was Wishfish for $1 each, and there's a lot of controversy on it. So we're using the next few weeks to just kind of get our act together.
All right.
Okay, I guess I'm next. ZBA, hi, good morning, everybody. We did not meet in August either, so I don't have any report for specific votes or anything, but when I think of August, I think of water, and we used to be an island without ferries, and now we have a ferry system coming, as you all know, to New York City. Within Community Board 8, the ferry will be starting on Roosevelt Island, connecting it to Long Island City, and that should be happening soon. We did have a planned ferry dock at 62nd Street, which was in the works for at least the last 9 months, and we were informed very recently that that's being yanked away, and the EDC and various other agencies have changed their mind. And one of the reasons was the the fact that the channel of water is too narrow in that area. So we're very concerned about trying to change their mind or have an alternative site for another ferry dock, because it's needed, not only for recreation but also for commuting. And I brought up the fact that the Circle Line ferry, Circle Line tour boat goes through the same channel, and that's a huge boat, so I don't understand that the channel is too narrow for a smaller water taxi ferry type of vessel. So we're going to have a meeting on September 14th concerning that issue, and hopefully we'll be able to change their mind or find an alternative site. We have 3 major street fairs in the Upper East Side where we have a table manned by 2 or 3 board members from 10 in the morning until 5 o'clock at night. That's where we do a lot of our outreach. And that's it for this month.
CB9?
I'm Gary Weinberg, sitting in for Padmore. We did not meet in August, although a lot of work continued apace. We were very excited that we will be having the Morningside Heights Historic District unveiling, although that has been moved now to September 8th. But it was a long struggle to achieve that historic district, and the Historic District Committee and the Borough President's Office and Councilmember Mark Levine and Assemblyman Danny O'Donnell all fought for that for a very long time. We're very happy. We also, in late July, reached an agreement to support a venture by Silicon Harlem and Columbia that also affects, I think, maybe a little part of CB10, to test out the next generation of wireless technology in our area. And so it will be a research tool and program, and there will be some benefits also toward the community that our support was conditional on. We have been working on planning a joint NYCHA forum with CB7, and that planning continues. Our transportation committee is also planning to begin in September a comprehensive look at our transportation plan. There have been a number of DOT modifications to traffic flow that have seemed a bit piecemeal to us. We would like, if they're going to be continuing to make modifications, to understand sort of the broader impact from Morningside Avenue all the way over to Riverside. Related to that, we'll be taking a significant look at the congestion pricing plan that is being discussed up in Albany. We are right now fairly opposed to that. We're concerned about the impacts that particularly the transit across, I think it was 60th Street or something in Manhattan. There's a proposed $5.50 toll to essentially cross from upper or mid-Manhattan down to lower Manhattan, and that intra-Manhattan toll kind of worries us. And so we would love to collaborate with the other boards to examine the impact that this congestion pricing scheme would have on our transportation and way of life. And as was discussed earlier, we continue to seek a Morningside Heights neighborhood rezoning. We've been participating in some community visioning meetings, and the irony is DCP is effectively saying to us, we don't think there's potential there for development. Meanwhile, we have 40-story luxury condo towers being developed at 2 different sites, and likely more on the way. So even if DCP does not see the development potential, the developers seem to. So we are still attempting to compile enough evidence of what's going on to force them to the table on beginning a contextual rezoning with some possible upzoning to include MIH and affordable housing. And we are finalizing our appointments of the new members to committees, and so we're very happy to have the new blood and to get people right into the details.
Wonderful. CB10.
Good morning, I'm John Lynch, Vice Chair of CB10. So we've had a lot of activity with our subcommittees and task forces over the summer. We are working on a forum probably for late fall will be addressing faith-based institutions, churches, synagogues, mosques, who have valuable real estate. Of course, up in Harlem, churches sit on and hold quite a lot of valuable real estate, but they sometimes are not equipped to know how to go about either developing or preserving those properties. So we're going to have a forum to address that. We'll have, legal advice and developmental advice, preservation advice. I actually spoke to Padmore the other day, and apparently you guys have been speaking with Union Theological Seminary about similar discussions. So we'll loop you guys in on what we're doing on that. We have, this year we started a seniors task force, or an older adult task force, as we've learned as well. And we had a little summit meeting the other day. Aldrin and Athena from our President's Office attended, which we appreciated. Again, talking about getting out information to seniors, information on senior centers, what's available, senior crime. Interestingly, a lot of the people participating spoke about how you have seniors who are 62 years old and seniors who are 82 and 92 years old. So you have younger older adults and older adults with different needs and different wants. So that's interesting. So we're going to continue with that task force and addressing those types of issues. We had a press conference last week introducing the 4 big belly trash receptacles that have been installed on 125th Street and Lenox Avenue. So as Harlem has grown in population, businesses have grown, particularly along 125th Street, we've had increased refuse and increased rats, increased health problems. So this past year, Dr. Hazel Dukes, who's the chair of our Health and Human Services Committee, she and the 125th Street BID, headed by our former CB chair, Barbara Askins, they got together and formed a healthy Harlem, clean and healthy Harlem committee, and among other things, lobbied to and raise money for these 4 big belly trash receptacles. The 4 of them combined cost $31,000, which includes the boxes themselves, but also ongoing maintenance. So these things, you open them with your foot, you don't have to touch them, they're fully enclosed, they have Wi-Fi capability, so somebody gets a notice when they're full, and they come and dump them. So that's where the maintenance cost, I think it's like a private entity who comes and manages these things. So we hope to get more along with 25th Street and other areas. We also dealt with a letter of support for the Columbia Wi-Fi project, and we work closely with Padmore to sort of coordinate the ask for the area. It's kind of a pretty amazing project, potentially. I think it's like $20 million of money being pumped into this. And of course, we talked about maybe kind of an Upper Manhattan kind of task force that will meet regularly with them to get the information, what's going on, who's being hired, what's the progress, and of course, what happens when monies are made from this project. They will potentially be developing next wave Wi-Fi, not just for Manhattan, for the entire world, and there's real potential profit benefits there, and we think that our community should benefit from those things. And finally, we, as I mentioned last month, Whole Foods is open up on 125th Street. They've been really good so far. They have been following through on their commitment to interact with and work with the community. They put about 25 local Harlem vendors on their shelves, and they've been kind of participating and reaching out and listening to what we've asked them about, including, for example, having perhaps a older adult discount day, which they are open to doing. And
it's the cheapest Whole Foods.
They say it's the
I've been
cheapest
to.
Whole Food, yeah, because they have their house brand.
365.
Yeah, and so essentially,
Not that we
just,
all don't go there.
it's basic math. The more shelf space for the 365, the lower the overall price of the goods. And again, they hired about 300 people, which we like as well. So I think that's it for us.
So I'm between the door and everyone, so I'll be brief. Last month I was not here. I was actually at Hilton Head, of course, thinking of you all. So let me just briefly say that I don't know if I don't think anyone was here to talk about the East Harlem neighborhood planning, and certainly I'm not going to talk about it. That information is available on the website. We voted no with conditions. I do want to take this opportunity, though, to commend my board members who, in the midst of intense adversity, stood fast, persevered, and voted. They wanted to make sure that the people knew how the board was voting on this very important action for East Harlem. And so I want to commend them. I want to commend publicly also the task force, because when you do go up on the website, you will see it is a very lengthy and comprehensive discussion as to how we came to our decision and why we came to the decision and why we're voting the way we were voting. Clearly, no with conditions. We're identifying those issues, most importantly, density. It's clearly an upzoning with limited, actually virtually no discussion of preservation, and all of the core values that is key to East Harlem, and also that was key to the priorities that we set forth in the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan. So I just wanted to say that. And I also want to thank the Manhattan Borough President's Office, because during this difficulty where there was calls to revote, they stood with us, they helped us to navigate the legal issues, and so the following week when we did meet again to continue where we left off, we ratified the vote that the vote stood. So again, I want to thank you for that. Mm-hmm. Now, we did meet in July and we did meet in August. We had a very busy month. We had the National Black Theater. Are you familiar with the National Black Theater? They had a ULUP. They're located on 125th Street and 5th Avenue. They're one of the oldest 25 years cultural institutions on 125th Street. They are looking at a mixed-use 22-story building that will give them a new theater and a new marquee identifying this is where the National Black Theater is. It is compliant with MIH 25%, 75%. Of course, that was a big issue with some of us. But at the end of the day, this is about cross-subsidizing the theater so that the cultural arts survive. And what they pointed out really was about the fact that they are the first on 125th Street to take advantage of the 125th Street rezoning, utilizing the culture. And if you remember, the rezoning was about maybe 2007, 2008. So, you know, that in itself is an accomplishment. So we voted, of course, to approve. Angel, as our district manager, he had been out. He has returned today. And so let's give him a round of applause, because, you know, health issues are always difficult, and he's back at work, and I promised him that I would not overtax him. So again, I'm so glad that he's back. And the last thing I will speak on is, of course, reflecting on what's been going on in the country, particularly with the statues in Charlottesville and other places throughout the country. I met yesterday with Gisele, and we met with Inez Barron and the Women Caucus for the council to talk about, one, the lack of women's statues in, of course, New York City as a whole, but also, most importantly for me, was the Marion Sims statue. And are you familiar with Marion Sims? He's located on 101st Street and 5th Avenue. It's a statue of a gentleman who is considered the father of gynecology. When you peel back and look into the history, it's not that he's just the father. He utilized African-American women slaves without their consent, without anesthesia, to develop the gynecological surgeries and equipment that's used today. We feel that there is no place for him on 5th Avenue and 101st Street, particularly in East Harlem communities of color, where you have a lot of women, not just women of color, but women in general. Women in general. And also it's on, I call it Medical Row. We've got Mount Sinai, we've got the New York Academy of Medicine. If ever there is a time to talk about, let's move him, this is the time. So I hope that you stand with us when you hear the press conferences, and it's just one element of that discussion yesterday, but clearly we are moving to take advantage of while all the focus is right now on Confederacy, but not just, as the mayor said, the mayor just announced he's going to do a 90-day review of all statues of hate on city property, and we are hoping that he includes.
He is
the-
including it, so
the
we talked to them yesterday.
Oh, see?
And we said, you know, you gotta include this in part of your review, and they said yes. So-
Good.
Well, thank you for that.
Put him in stirrups, we'll do a little unauthorized.
So that's my report.
We had somehow discussed that at an LGBT task force meeting when we were discussing the lack of representation of LGBT people in history in Upper Manhattan. And that statue came up, and it was suggested that they replace it with a statue dedicated to his victims, essentially, who were his forced deaths.
So I will just give you a little brief history. They came to us last year in June of 2016 with this plaque that they wanted to put on the statue. The plaques had the name of the women. The issue I had with it, as well as the rest of the board, the plaque would have to go at the bottom of his feet. That was not happening. Optically, that is not what you want to have. The victims are tied to the oppressor for an eternity. We turned that down, and we reiterated. We took the position. We have been talking about it, and you all know how you talk about it. But I had suggested and recommended we take a position that's on record, and I'm very glad that we did so.
So has the board voted on it?
The board has voted to remove the statute 2016.
Where's your report?
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, Court.
Hi,
Oh, sorry.
Will that report be available, the listing of all these
The ones that
statutes?
are under review, I don't.
We can contact
They were gonna release it today, I can find out if they did, we can send it around.
That'd be
They're gonna
great.
release all the ones
I would like to
that
think that that conversation we were having at city council yesterday somehow never got back to the mayor. Oh, my.
It was
Sorry.
it was a perfect timing for that meeting you had.
Oh,
because,
thanks.
yeah,
Good.
it's great.
Thank you, sorry to interrupt.
It's okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Corey from Councilmember Garodnick's office. 3 very quick things. We just wanted to thank the Manhattan Borough President, staff, and CB 5, 6, and 8 for everything that you all did regarding the East Midtown rezoning. We're very pleased with how it turned out, and we're looking forward, especially for the transit improvements, public space, and to give the business district a jolt, which we think will be great for generations to come. You brought up the Soundview Ferry issue. 2 weeks ago, we actually sent a letter to EDC asking them to add a stop at 34th Street on this ferry. It was just breezing straight from the Upper East Side down to Wall Street. We think that Midtown is a transit hub. You can connect to the SBS across town, and it really didn't make sense for people from the Bronx and the Upper East Side not to have a connection to Midtown and all the other ferries. They did add this stop, and as you mentioned, they took away 62nd Street, so we should definitely talk, because I know that the council member, it's not our district that stop in 62nd, but it's certainly where a lot of our constituents would want to ride from. And finally, regarding CRT, I love the idea of the Borough Board putting out a resolution, so I'll connect with probably Lucille and you guys to figure out how this is going to work. And just as an update, we have 41 co-sponsors on the City Council from all 5 boroughs.
Where are the other ones?
Trust me, we're continuing to talk to them, but this is a no-brainer issue that would help 3,400 small businesses in Manhattan, and we are continuing to put on the pressure because this is something that the city can really do with the stroke of a pen. Doesn't have to rely on Albany to really give a break to the businesses that we love in our neighborhoods. So thank you.
Thanks for the work.
All right, everybody, motion to adjourn.
We missed our
Second?
Second?
Wonderful. And we're
We're
off.
making
Motion
motions
carries.
to get us to move along.
You have reminders.